Okay, so we're gonna get started. I'm recording this one. This is probably gonna be more of a basic session on how to set up cards and just the general fields, and we'll go over like how to set up and format fields. I'm gonna do another one next Friday that will be a little bit more advanced, where we might actually dive into like HTML. I find a lot of times I do these ones one-on-one with people, and they provide me with a card to use. Which is great, but a lot of the times halfway through we realize it's far more difficult and probably harder to learn on the first go around. So I just found this card on our demo site, and I'm just going to do kind of the most generic card. I find a lot of times that I've seen people's cards they've set up on their own is that they maybe overthought it and made it a little more complicated than it should have been. So for the example of a card where, like if we took this one for example, they have a name, a title, an email, a phone, cell, and fax. So at the very least, I would say probably, maybe cell is missing, and they don't have to have a cell, and the fax moves up. But in a lot of cases, it looks just like this. Things never move. They have to have all three, or they always have all three. So you don't have to get complicated. You can literally just set it up so that they just have a field to type in. It doesn't have to have any rules that says, move up or down. So I guess that's always the first thing you want to think about when you're looking at your card is you want to know what's required on the card, what changes on the card, what happens when things change. So in the case of a card like this, are phone, cell, and fax mandatory? If they are mandatory, then we don't really have to do anything. But if, let's say, cell and fax are optional, well, what happens to phone? Does it move to the bottom? Does it move to the center? Does it move up? Does it just stay where it is? Do they have to have an email? How big can that email be? How close to fax can it get? Once it gets close to fax, and let's say it's an 8 point, at what point do we go down to a 7 or 6 point, or are we allowed to? So some cards aren't going to be as complicated. Some people are pretty simple when it comes to their business cards. It's just like put my name and that on it. And then you'll get into some more complex customers that have like some true branding standards that you'll have to follow. So at least in the first one, I'm going to give you an introduction of what we use. We currently use a third party called eDoc for all our variable, can't even think of the word now, variable docket integration. So the way that we start it always is basically a PDF. You need a PDF of the item that you want to create. I always suggest that it has the most amount of information that you are allowed to have on the card. So if they can have 4 phone numbers, 2 titles, an email, and credentials, even if it's not a real person's card, you should have a template filled out that has the max amount of information, because we want to set it up for that person who has the most amount, and then we just want to format it in a way that would work for anyone else. So if your card has a bleed, which this one technically would, you want to work with a card that has the bleed on it. So if you're using your 1/8 inch bleed, your overall PDF size should be 3.75 by 2.25, but you don't want to include crop marks. We can do that after the fact. You can do that if you're using your own imposition tool. We just want to not show those to the client, so you don't want to include them on the PDF. And I did forget to mention at the beginning, Tori is here and he's on chat, so again, if you have any questions, he's not as familiar with variable templates, so there's a good chance he'll just stop me and we'll talk about the question as we're going. So once you have a PDF of the item, basically you have to determine the rules like we talked about, like what's mandatory, how do things fit, and then it's all built with basically a fillable PDF. If it is a 2-page document, it has a back, whether the back has fields or whether the back just has an image, you would just have a 2-page PDF. If you had a 40-page book that you wanted to put up, you could have a 40-page PDF. It's whatever it is that's what you put up. So I know if you're using like the new one, part of mine just converted to it and I don't like it, but I think it's Adobe DC is the new one. So when you're using that one, I believe the term is prepare form. On the Acrobat Pro that I'm using right now, I just have one on the side that says forms, and then I go to edit. It always asks me if I want to detect the fields. No, I don't want it to do that. And then what I'm always doing is text fields. So there's not a lot of, and honestly, not having a graphics background, maybe you guys know something more than I do, but I have no like scientific way or whatever precise way to find where a box should sit. I normally just put it as close to the top left of the box as I can. You'll kind of get used to it, so once you start laying out a couple cards, it honestly becomes super easy. I can almost get it in the right spot every time. The one thing you do have to remember is although the box looks like it fits this text, sometimes, and I'm not entirely sure why, sometimes the text doesn't think it can fit. So I've made a card before where I've made all the fields just slightly too short, like maybe it was sitting like this. They all looked good, but when I went to create and test the PDF, it all came up blank because none of it thought it could fit in the box. So I always like to make the bottom just a little bit bigger. It honestly doesn't matter how big I make it. It's not going to touch Operations Manager. I'm going to top left align all of my stuff. The only time that alignment even matters is if we're doing, and this is probably more of a next week topic, a master field with HTML in which text needs to slide accordingly. In that case, you would have to tell it top right, bottom right, top left, bottom left, so that the text flows down correctly. But in this case, because we're just using individual text boxes, I always go top left. So a couple of rules when you're naming your fields. These names mean nothing to anyone except you. No one has to see these, so you can name them whatever you want. There are rules. You're not allowed to use spaces. You're not allowed to use numbers. So if you had titles, you'd want to actually do title, O-N-E, title, T-W-O. So you actually spell out the letters. You will fail, and I'll show you when we go to upload it. If you have something like that, it will fail for you, and then you just have to come back and check. But generally, once you do it the first time, you remember. So in this one, we're going to call it name. I'm a big fan of copy and pasting, so I'm just going to copy my fields. And for this card, what we're going to say is they have to have a name, they have to have a title, they have to have an email, they have to have a phone, but we're going to say cell and fax are technically optional. Going to make it a little bit smaller. These ones are text that are a little bit smaller than the last. I know my phone and fax and cell, the fields probably should line up all the way. That looks pretty good for right now. Okay, so we have our three main fields. I'm going to leave the address on this one as is. Technically, I could make it variable if it changed. If there is just one address on the card and it never needs to move, so this address is not going to be affected by anything I do on the card, you can leave it all as background text. It doesn't have to be actually an input field. The only time you would want to is one, if it changes, or two, if for some reason it needs to move according to other text that's moving. The other thing that is you might run into is, so, realtor business cards sometimes have photos, or sometimes you have additional logos like FSC and stuff like that. The other thing is perhaps logos. So I'm not going to do it on this card. I'm just going to show you while I'm doing the PDF. But basically, let's say Allied Biscuit had 3 different versions of a logo. They have 3 divisions. Everything on the card is identical except for the logo. What you can do is you can put a box around the logo, and then you would have to make the 3 logos basically fit within the box. So whether you have to add white space to them, you'd want to go, of course, with the biggest logo that you have, but you'd want to basically offer JPEG or PDF images, or I think you can do like PNGs in that, of the logo. So basically they go to fill out the card, then they could just pick the logo from a drop down. The other reason you might do this is, let's pretend that this is a shell. You actually print the head office, the Allied Biscuit, everything. We could actually have the entire card as the image. You could have each individual thing as an image, but you would have a box around it because we would want it to show up for proofing purposes, but we would not want to show up on the print ready file. So that's another reason that you might highlight create a text box around each of the images and then provide images for the client to see. So I'm just going to save this. We will call it whatever we want to. So that's probably I don't know if I'd call it the most amount of work or the easiest work. It's just creating your PDF. After that, it's going to be setting the rules. So I'm just going to pull it to my other screen. I'm going to come on to my demo site. I'm going to go into settings, and I'm going to go into variable templates at the bottom under online ordering. Probably most of you, if you've never made one, you would come in and there obviously wouldn't be anything here. I have quite a few because this is my demo site and we play on it a lot. But what you're going to do is when you come in, under Create Template, is you're going to give it a name. Again, just for you, means nothing to anyone else. But you do want to give it a little bit of a name in case you have anything that's similar. Once you give it a name, you just hit Create, and it's going to bring up to the main page. So the first page, or first tab, sorry, that you always start on is called Assets. And the first thing you want to do, as you can see, it says I have not uploaded my master PDF yet. So I'm going to go and find the one that I just made, and I'm going to open it. And provided I named all the fields in a manner that it likes, it will show up like this, and it will say Commit Template. So if I'm ready and I pick the right one, I'm going to hit Commit Template. It'll just take a minute. Basically what it's doing is it's looking at the PDF and it's actually grabbing all the fields I just created and bringing them in. So the next thing on this page after you do a PDF, obviously we're probably not going to do all of these things, but I'll explain each one. So fonts, you have a couple options. One, you have a font library, or you have a font for a specific template. So up at the top is your font library. Down here is just fonts for this template. So if Allied Biscuit has numerous things that are always using the same font, it might be smart to add it to the font library, so you just have to go grab it whenever you want to use it. If this is a weird font that literally only this card is ever going to use, is there any point in storing it in the library because you're not going to use it again? If that's the case, then we'll just add it to the actual template. Now, I don't know a lot about fonts, but I do know that they like the open type and the true type. Something about Mac fonts, not sure why, that they're unsupported. Any fonts that I can't find, I normally can download pretty easily, but my computer comes with a lot as well. So I did already download those fonts before. So I have my two fonts right here. So I'm just going to grab them, drag them in. They're just going to upload themselves. And I'm just going to come down to the bottom and save my fonts. So now I can add more fonts anytime I want. I can use any of these fonts. You can use them all. And then below that, again, you're probably not going to use this often, but anything graphic files is going to be images that the client can see, but probably can't do anything about. So in the case where we were talking about with the PDF, something being a shell, a logo would be a graphic file where you're going to display it somewhere on the card, but they're not actually going to be able to change it or like pick a different one or upload their own. So that's why you would have graphic file. And then you have the option of 5 image picker groups. And just while we're talking about this, I'm just going to pull up one of my demo sites. So image picker groups are basically where you give them a list of images that they're allowed to use. So again, kind of like if they had 3 logos, image picker 1 could be those 3 logos. The card I have on the demo site actually displays it pretty well. So in this one, what they have, oh, did someone move mine? All right, maybe, do I have it? Maybe 1 second. There it is. this one actually has a couple of different ones. They have the map on the back. So in this case, it's a two-sided card, which is, it's just a static image, but no variable text. So what they've actually done is they have 4 locations. They would have a map for each one. So they just made the entire back of the card, an image, and then they provided them in a drop-down. So this would be one of the image pickers. The other one is on here is that they have basically a blank JPEG, and then they have an FSC or recycled on print paper. So again, if you were to pick one of them, it would show up on the card. So on the PDF, there'll be a box here, and then they're providing 3 different images, 1 being blank, and 2 being actual image options that they're allowed to pick from. So you are allowed to do up to 5. The next place I go when I'm in here then is the template info. So again, it just reiterates the name and just repeats the description of the name of the card that I gave it. If you want to, when previewing to a client, you can type the words like proof, and it will just watermark the background. If the card comes in with an actual bleed, then you would put in the bleed. What that will do is if you brought in a 3.75 by 2.25 card, the client would only see the 3.5 by 2 like they're supposed to. So it does let the system know that there is an 1/8" bleed on this card. Down at the bottom, most important field that you will have is the identifying field. Basically what that does is it looks at the card, and you can identify one of these things as how you want to name the card. So when the artwork comes through or when the order comes through, generally for a business card we do a name. So that's going to name the print ready file John Smith, and it's going to bring the art file in as John Smith BC or whatever it is. So if you don't pick one of those, what you're going to get is, I'm not sure how many characters it is, but it's like a 30-digit number and letter, what we call like a GUID. So basically just an identifying number, which is going to mean absolutely nothing to anyone. So your best bet is to pick one of these things. So on a business card, generally name is what happens. Imposition, which we'll get to in a little bit, most people, well, I'd say about 50-50. Some people leave it as a one-up business card and they use their own imposition tools or whatever that they have to, put it 18 up or 21 up or whatever it is that they need. Some people actually set up their own imposition schemes on here, so the card automatically comes through that way. So you can set it up with bleeds and crop marks and duplex. So it all really just depends on your workflow and what you choose to do. On the side here, I always like to set it to standard. It's just the nicest view for the client. Then they don't have to change it every time. At any point, they can change the view size, which you'll see in a few minutes. So I just like to start at standard. It's just a personal preference. And then allow downloading PDF. Probably have to trust your clients pretty well. And it also depends, I guess, on the proofing process that they're used to. So you can allow them to download a PDF of whatever it is they're viewing when they're creating their proof. Completely up to you. If you do allow them to, the watermark will show up on it if you have one. So maybe it's not as bad, but I probably have less people that do it than don't. So again, your choice. So when you're done making your changes on this page, basically you're just going to come down to save changes. It has a full activity log, so you can always see what's happening. It's all under one user because that's just how eDoc is signed in, but you can see all the changes that were made and when. So coming to the field setup, so as you can see, the system grabbed all the fields that I made on that PDF. It does bring it in, however, in alphabetical order, which doesn't really do us any good when we're filling out the card. So what you want to do is you want to put it in the order that makes sense for the client filling it out. So in this case, we're going to go name, then title, then email, then phone, then self, and fax. And that's the order we want them to fill it out in, so that's the order that we drag them into. So I like to expand all just so I can start working on my field. So this is where you're going to start setting rules as to how that card operates. The PDF is what drives the size of the field and where it should be placed on the card, but this is really what drives what's going to show in that field. So first one is field type. So you have text, You have user entry, which is client either types in a text box, a text error, or a drop down. You can fill from another field. So if you had a double-sided card, like say for a hospital, their name appears on both sides, but they just have like different titles and stuff. Rather than make them type their name in twice, you could have the name from the second side of the card pull from the first side of the card. You can do static text or field scripting. So similar to what I was talking about with the address, is if the address had to move based on different text, but it never actually changed, is we could actually type the address in as static scripting, as static text, and then the clients wouldn't be able to change it, but we'd still be able to allow it to move freely. Variable data file, you can use that for a couple different things. It is really just the mapping of an Excel. So let's say this business card, sometimes they type in, one-offs, but most of the time that they send me, a 20-line Excel for 20 different people. What you can do is you can have 2 copies of this card. You could create one in the sense that they're going to type it in. Then you could create one, duplicate it, and change all the fields to variable data. What that will do is when they go to fill out the card, it'll ask them to pick a CSV. They'll pick a CSV, and then it will come up and try and map all their columns to the fields, and then they can choose, like it'll show up the field name, and they can pick which column that feeds into. By default, it will generate five of the proofs visible on the screen. So provided the spreadsheet is correct, it would, they can assume the cards are correct. It will come through to you as a 20-page PDF or whatever it is that you're doing. Otherwise, you could do it for something like postcards, where people could actually drop in, you have one postcard and they could update their mailing list, and it's already automatically going to put all the addresses onto the postcards and send them to you that way. And then you have text overflow. I haven't used that often. I used it once with a newsletter where I needed to fill basically one column first, and if that column was full, then it needed to spill out into a particular column. So I just had to identify which one was the overflow. Then you have an image. Basically with image, you can have user entry, which means they upload it, or they pick from an image picker group. Or you can have graphic file, which again is where we set an image on the thing and they can't do anything to change it or move it or get rid of it. And then the last thing is barcode. It can do, I don't know if it's still set up on this one properly. Don't think it is. I think it used to show up in the corner. I think someone just played with my demo one so much. But it can actually generate QR codes based on website URLs. It can create, I think, about 13 different kinds of barcodes. I've done one. I think it's like a 10-digit one. But basically, if you pick that, it'll give you the option of barcodes, and then you can set it up accordingly. So we're just going to, in this instance, because it's a name, we're going to go back to text, and we're going to go back to user entry. Then we go to data capture. So data capture is going to change depending on what you just picked on the previous thing. So because we picked text and user entry, I can pick a text box, I can pick a text area, or I can pick a drop-down list. I can choose if this field is required, and then the prompt text. So if I were to hit test template now for you to see, you'll see a bunch of fields and they all say enter information. That's really not going to help the client fill out the card at all. So what you need to do is provide what you want that field to be called. So that's what the prompt text is. So if I just put in name, it's going to come up name. Tooltip is if maybe name isn't self-explanatory enough. Obviously, name probably is. But in the instance of this sample that we had, QR code is the name of the field, but the tooltip is to enter a website URL. So just a little bit more information. Default value, probably not for name, but you might do it for email or something where you'll actually pre-fill, at documenter.ca for them, so they don't have to type it out. They just have to type it at the beginning. Or if there's an address that 90% of the time is the thing that they use, you can type it in for them, and then it still is available to change if they needed to. An entry block just breaks up literally where you enter the fields in. So you'll see on this one, as I just have you know, it's only 6 fields, but it just goes straight down. You'll see on this one that someone combined phone, extension, email, and address into an entry block. Basically, they just made an entry block and applied it to those 4 fields, which will put it in a box together. Time that I do it the most is when a card has information on both sides, is I normally block off side 1 field and I block off side 2 field. In the format tab is where you start setting kind of the rules. So in this case, I think this is, have to look on my PDF because I don't know what the fonts are. So this one is Futura Bold, and it's a 9-point. If my font doesn't come in a bold or an italic or anything, you can fill it out here. I'm going to keep my alignment top left. Again, if you want to do center left, or you actually are doing, you know, later on with a master field in HTML, then alignment will matter, but everything for me is going to stay top left. And then I have tracking and letting. I don't honestly know if this card has it yet. We'll find out. But if you do know that it has, you know, any additional character or line spacing, you can fill it out. I can choose whether or not this card can force fit. So right now I'm at a 9-point. Will I let it go down to an 8? Sure. Or I'll just turn it off so that I can't, that it won't reduce. I just want to make sure I match the card exactly. Max lines would be if you have like a text area rather than a text box. You can limit them at how many lines they're allowed to type. When I work on a card, I always change everything to magenta because I actually like to lay the fields. So you'll see that the name and all that is still in the card. I'm going to lay my fields right over top of it and line it up. When I'm done, I'll remove all this background text and change, obviously, to the correct black text. But I always start in magenta to see how my spacing is. Then you can do, if you have any horizontal or vertical scaling, text reformat. You can set things to be uppercase, lowercase. You can set phone numbers so that, you know, they're always in the correct formatting. We'll probably come into this again on the more advanced one, but basically field usage. Pretty much everything you're doing right now is going to be proof and production file. In the case of where we talked about the shells and showing the logo on here, basically that would be proof only. We don't want the production file to come through with that. And in the case of actual HTML, we would hide fields because we'd want to use them for data entry only, but we'd want to use master fields in order to control them. But for these instances, we're going to do proof and production file. I have nothing for field scripting. Again, we'll come back to that. Gets a little bit more complicated. If you know HTML, great, and if you don't, it's honestly what you'll use on the card is super easy. Stacking groups we are going to touch on a little bit. Basically, it's just another way to make fields slide, which we'll show when we get down to like cell and facts. And then positioning. So very rare if I ever use this. Technically, if you want to manually set the position of the box on the PDF, you can. Only time I've ever used this is when, pull this over, I had a business card and the text was facing the other way on the right edge. You still have to place your field horizontally in order to pivot and place in the right spot. I had to make it on the card big enough to fit the text in, but then I had to use the override position in order to get it to show in the right spot. So now that we're done with that one, we are just going to save. So always just make sure that you're saving. So title will be fairly easy. It's going to be very similar to name. It's going to be text, and it's going to be user entry. In the data capture, we're going to say it's required. We're going to do a prompt text subtitle. We're going to go in the format tab, and I'm going to find out what this is. It's Futura medium, and it's a 7-point. And I'm going to change this to magenta, and I'm going to take the force fit off. That's all I have to do, so I'm going to hit save. If you ever get this warning, basically it just means that your font It's technically bigger than the minimum font size, so if you ever turn this on, it would fail, so it just wants me to go 7 or less in that field. Email, again, text and user entry. Go in data capture. Field name is going to be email. Just to make people's lives a little bit better, I'm going to fill the ending of the email address. This one also appears to be future a medium. And 7. Take off my force fit. So not that I have to, but just based on this card, it looks like emails are always in lowercase. So I'm going to set it to lowercase, just so I make sure that no one can type in capitals if they feel like doing it. And I'm also going to check always reformat. If you don't check it, what it's going to do, the first time you fill it out, it's going to change things to lower. But then if they wanted to, change the email by 1 letter, it's not going to set it again the next time. So they do have the ability to override. But if you do check off always reformat, it's always going to go back to what it should be. And then we're going to make this one magenta. And now for phone, it'll be all the same. We're going to say phone. So I guess this one I made a little bit big. Maybe we'll do a little bit. So let me pull this back over. I wasn't thinking when I put the fields on. Normally, for a simple card, because phone and fax wouldn't matter, is I would just do part of the phone. In this case, we're going to go a little bit bigger. We'll do just a little bit HTML then, just so you can kind of see how this would work. So we're going to go into format. These are dashes. So that's good to remember. We're going to close. Okay, so it is 7 as well. So we're going to go into medium. We're going to change it to 7. Change to magenta, and we want the one that has dashes in it. So that would be this one. And always reformat. So what I'm going to do on the field scripting, I wasn't really originally thinking when I was doing this, but we're going to do it on here anyway. Basically, if you type any words in this box, those are going to show on the card. So in this case, I want the word phone to show up, and I want to use the phone field that I made. So anytime you see @ signs, I'm not going to go too crazy explaining this, but basically, anytime you see @ signs and a word in the middle, this means a field from the card. So the client fills out a phone number, so this is going to put whatever they enter into this thing. So it's going to say phone, 1 space, and then it's going to show whatever phone number they type. In the case of this card, it is a little bit different. The word phone is the same size, but it's actually bold. So not knowing HTML or things, there are little things that will help you, so like a code snippet. So I'm just going to drop bold in. I'm just going to put bold around the phone number, and all that means is that this is going to turn bold, and this is going to put, drag that over, and this is going to put the actual phone number in. I'm actually just going to copy this whole thing so I don't have to do it again. And we're going to hit save. And then we're going to go down to cell. Field type will be the same. We're going to make it not required because they don't have to have it if they don't want to. We'll go to the format tab, and we'll go to medium, 7, and force fit 7. And the one with dashes. And then I'm going to go into the field scripting again. I'm just going to dump in that same thing I already did because then I don't have to think about it. So basically the same thing as the other one. It's going to make the word cell, colon, space, and bold, and then it's going to have a cell number. I'm actually going to throw one more thing into it just because these, I don't know. Some people call them handlebars. I call them squiggly brackets. I'm sure there's a more technical term for it. But basically when you have two sitting on either side, what that means is like, if they fill the cell field out, then it's going to do all of these things. And if they don't fill it out, then it's not going to do any of these things. So that's all the bracket means. It means, you know, if they do, fill it out. If they don't worry about it. But the main thing that I want to go over this one was stacking groups. So this is just kind of a more simple version of HTML, where with the HTML, I could do all of this card and move everything around pretty easily. But sometimes people don't find HTML as easy, and stacking groups are still a really great way to do it. So basically, I'm just going to make a stacking group. I'm going to call it numbers. It really, again, just for you, means absolutely nothing to anyone. So I'm just going to call it numbers, and I'm going to say things slide up. So whenever a field's missing, they slide up. So I just hit update. That's going to create. It's going to clear it all out. And I want the cell to be part of a stacking group, which means if I don't fill out the cell, then I want whatever below it to move up. So we're going to do a save. Then we're going to go do all the same stuff for facts. So under here, we're going to go fact. Oh, spell. Required. I'm going to go to the Format tab. So kind of the nice thing, the one nice thing about HTML, and provided that doing it isn't that simple, is just that you only have to fill this out once. So if I was doing an HTML master field, I would only have to fill out the font once. But because I'm doing individual fields, I do have to fill it out each time. Not the end of the world, because sometimes it still is easier than HTML. We will put on the always reformat. Oh, I should put this field scripting. So this will say facts. I will get the facts field. Then I'll go to stacking groups, and I also want this one to be part of numbers. I think I forgot to throw the brackets on. Okay, so I think that I have done everything. Once you think that you filled everything out, you want to commit changes. So what that does is it actually accepts all the changes you just made and forces them into the actual template. So now that I've done that, and I know that the commit changes work, because what it does is it collapses all my fields. So I'm going to go into test template. As you can see, I've named all the fields properly now, so they do have good names. It's brought in my default email brief, or whatever it's called, suffix. So now what I do is I like to fill out the card exactly as the background text is, because I want that text to lay over top, and I want to see how well I did in both my field placement as well as formatting the cards properly. Just for the heck of it, I'm going to type this one in capitals, so you can see it's actually going to end up moving it into lowercase. Phone is 519. Okay, so once I think I have all the information filled out, I'm going to update the preview. So the other thing I like to do is when I'm testing, so when the client's filling out their card, this is absolutely fine. When I'm testing, I always jump into extra large, just so I can really see up close how close I am. So I'm pretty close on some of these things. Obviously, I need to move the fields maybe just a little bit to the right. I've done something here with my phone. Looks like I might just be a little bit off with maybe spacing. Same with back, same with cell. So what you would do is once you see kind of how the position is, we would just come back to the PDF. And we're just going to, that was all of them, right? Move the fields over a little bit. I am only good at dragging and dropping. Honestly, if you know Adobe or can do anything, you can always right-hand click and do properties and go to the position field and do the positioning like this if that's easier for you. I just only know how to drag and drop. I'm sure sometimes it would just be easier to position the field than trying to move it just a little bit. I'm going to save it. Then all I have to do is come back. I don't have to lose any of my information. I'm just going to go to the Asset tab, reselect it. Commit it. And as soon as it's done, I come back here and I just update. And it should shift things over. So name and title, and that's looking pretty good. My phone number's still a little weird. I'm not sure what I did on that one. We'll have to take a look at it. Same with phone and fax. So it looks like maybe the font size is different. The bold font, yeah. Oh, that's not what I meant. So probably more than the bold, but actually the bold font, and not so much just bolding the medium font. So we're going to have to tweak my HTML a little bit. So we're going to go into field setup. I don't know what the name is. Just Futura BT Bold. Make my life easier. I'm going to open this one up so I can copy it. So I'm going to have to lose the bold tag. Honestly, again, we'll come back to all of the HTML on a more advanced one, but just for the sake of lining things up, it is Futura BT Bold. Font size is the same. Save it. It's going to be the same thing as updating the PDF. All I'm going to have to do is go and update my test templates. I'm not going to have to redo anything. It's just automatically going to take. So try it again. That's looking considerably better. Normally, I'd probably move the cell down a little bit, but I'm just going to call it good for now. So then what I would do next is I would take my PDF, I would edit the text and images, and I would remove whatever it is that the client's going to be typing in. So all of this information should be blank. I like to save a separate copy of the PDF, because if anything happened and maybe all of a sudden something, just got misaligned or something actually got changed, I can just go upload my original with the text that I can lay over top again and double check it, and then I can just jump back to my blank one as well. I don't have to worry about overwriting the PDF that I had. So I'm going to go back into here. We're going to pick the blank one. Take a second to commit. And if I update, you'll see I don't have text anymore in the background, but what I do need to do is obviously not print it in magenta. So what I do is then just change the field color. Once I've got them all, I commit my changes again. And then we will update. So technically, now that I've set all my rules, I've set all my fields, this is actually ready for the client. So provided the MIS side is set up, kind of what we did on the Monday and Thursday webinar this week, which there are recordings for, all I would have to do is attach this to the MIS side, and it would be ready for the client. Just a few other things that are on here before I open it up to any questions. So one thing is response sets. I have some people that use these for different things. On my sample card, a response set basically is a location where we've pre-filled it for them. So they pick St. Mary's. It's going to put in St. Mary's phone number. It's going to pick St. Mary's address. It's going to pick St. Mary's back. So just some pre-fills. If they have multiple locations, you can just have some starter information for them. I have a couple people. I have one person that has like a company. I don't remember how many users there are, but they've actually filled out all the person's information. So there's about 100 things that these people can order from, and they fill them out on all. So it picks their headshot. It picks all of their information, their phone, their email, their whatever, their title, everything else. I have someone similar who did it for like a police force. They actually went ahead and typed out 990 response sets so that they didn't have to do it themselves. So again, just a nice thing you can do for your client, but not the end of the world, because you do have this pre-fill box anyway. So when the client orders for the first time, they will have a pre-fill box. You'll see I don't have it on here, but it is available when they're ordering. So if they type their name in here, the first time they do a card, the next time they order, their name is going to show up in the list. They can pick it, and it's going to pre-fill whatever they chose last time, and then they can make changes if they want to. And then just going across the top, again, impositions, if you choose to use them on here, you can. So you just create schemes. You tell it how many across. We'll just go and edit this one. So you give it a name. Tell it the size of the paper, so it's a 12-18 sheet. We're running portrait, so 12 being, of course, the width in this case, the 18. If we did the other way, it would show the other way. And then the cards being 2 by 3.5, so more of a portrait style card. What the size is with bleeds, left and bottom margin. You can include crops and make it duplex. So it will actually just basically send you out a print ready file that is, 21 up on a 12-18 or 20 up or however it is that you print them. Again, font library, if you just want to bring in commonly used fonts. Image library, if you want to have like generic images, you want to have some, Christmas cards that they can pick from with a few different images, you can do that. One thing that most people don't realize at first is, so every instance that I hit update preview, whether it's on a test or it's the client actually creating the card, I have an instance of that card in here. So any card that a client ever creates will show up in here. So regardless if something happened and you lost the file or almost impossible to do, it is always here. So you can always get a PDF. You can always generate a production file. This will store every instance of the card. So that was probably a lot to take in, but because there's not too many of you, I was just going to unmute everyone's lines, and if you want to ask a question, we can do that. So everyone is unmuted. Does anyone have any questions?
Can I ask a question? It's Anna from.
Sure.
I was trying to upload our card, and
Yep.
The particular form that we apparently received from head office wasn't a TrueType font. So I was looking and looking. It was a font collection. So what I have just one icon, and I was trying to upload this font, and it didn't go through. So I tried to find the free font. It's a GeoStem, so it's a very common font. So I found one that I have to pay for it. So what I did eventually, I tried and added this file. I added the .ttf.
Mm-hmm.
Miraculously, it uploaded the font. But I'm just wondering, I have a lot of old files. So if I don't have this TrueType font, do you have any access to, I don't know, online libraries that I can use?
Okay, yeah, so you can use a TrueType or an OpenType. Trying to think of what I normally use. There's like let's look up Future. I honestly just Google it. But there is a couple that always work quite well, and that is, I believe it's this one, My Font Free.
My Font Free, okay.
There's a couple, and they're normally the top ones that come up, so you just watch these big buttons next to that, not for that. Then it will just drop, so there and drop me in Futura. So just make sure when it will normally give you a zip, and then you can just make sure you extract it before you try and upload it, because it won't take it. But I honestly, I just Googled the font. I've only come across a couple hard to find, and I think they were very specific fonts, and then it was just like on a train someone to do it, and they actually had the fonts. I was just doing it for an actual training session. But there are lots of, and even if you're on like when I'm on a PC, there is a font folder that comes with it. I don't know a lot about Macs, so Macs may have it as well. But a lot of fonts come in here as well.
Now, tell me, please, in terms of HTML coding, I'm not an expert, but these codes that you used, so the font and then add and font and add again, and then you added double brackets. The regular HTML code that I used, and again, not every day, but I never seen the code like this. So I'm just wondering, do you have some kind of help or some kind of tutorial that I can use to find the right code for what
you're trying to do? So in terms of the add thing, I believe that's just something eDoc created to identify their fields. That's not like a true HTML. That's just how they're identifying fields. I believe the font face stuff is true HTML, and there also uses one other one. So let me just open one more tab here. Down at the bottom, you'll see articles.
Yes. Okay.
If you come in here, they are under online template builder.
Wow. Oh my God. You have, yeah.
So they're all chapters. So you can search them. So you can search something like font, and it will, span tags. It'll HTML tags. There are the chapters. I mean, if you ever had a free few minutes, they're very informative. Everything that you can do on here is in here. So you have your normal.
The regular, the H1, H6. This is a standard HTML code, but the font add was definitely something new, at least new for me. So
yeah, this isn't specifically HTML. This is just a field identifier, is all that is. Typing words in is just text that you want to show. Everything else is HTML. So the font tags, the bold tags, any style runs for tabs or character spacing or line spacing, all of that is in here. So it has all your style runs, listings. We'll do all your subs and bolds. This is also how you can do small caps.
Yeah.
So they have pretty much everything in here as well. They give you examples.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, it makes sense. Okay.
Anyone else have anything?
In terms of color, so you have two options. You have CMYK or you have a phantom color. So would you recommend just to match the color mode with the original file, or is it any preferences?
I've actually run into a few things. So CMYK normally does it. Any color that works well with CMYK is good. When you're doing something like an offset, what you would probably do is, so let's say you're doing an offset and it's like one actual process blue color. The CMYK is what you're going to use just for the screen, just for the client to see it on the screen. And then what you would do is you'd have a spot color name. And what that's going to do is just create one plate as opposed to 4 for the CMYK. So if you use CMYK only, then that's more like digital or things. If you add a spot color name and just said like blue, that's going to tell the system to only create one plate as opposed to 4.
Now for the preview, let's say if I have the CMYK colors that I must to fill or must to specify for a customer to be able to see any color, right? So if I leave it 0000, it will be blank, right? So the customer,
white, yes.
now if I leave CMYK by mistake, let's say I have 0000, and then I choose some spot color number, so it will override the CMYK, or the CMYK is the first choice and the only choice for previewing.
The CMYK is the only choice, sorry, with the exception, is the only real choice for previewing. That being said, is that technically field scripting overrides everything. So one thing that's actually happened is I had somebody who had a card, and I can't remember what the orange color was, but like on the PDF, we took the orange color that they had, we matched it with CMYK. When we put it up on the screen, they looked identical to what the background logo was, to what the CMYK was. When we printed it, it was obviously a color that does not work well with CMYK, and it printed a completely different color. So what we did is, I have a site that I use, so rgb.to. So you'll see, like, let's pretend this was the color. There are hex safe or website values that you can enter in. So rather than use CMYK for printing, is you can put these in the HTML as the color, just kind of like, where did we go? So if we did like the color.
Oh, okay, so you find the equivalent of online color of, let's say, you have CMYK combination, and this allows you to find the closest color in RGB or web friendly format. Okay.
Yeah, and the documents will actually tell you how to do, in here you can do CMYK, you can do RGB, or you can do hex color. So sometimes, it's not always, CMYK works fairly well, but there are times that I have had just colors that don't mix well with or just don't do well with CMYK, and we've had to put in a hex color in order for it to print. So on the card that the example that I was talking about, when you looked on the screen, the logo and once we put the hex color in, the logo and the name didn't look even close. Like one was like a burnt, like rust color, and the other was like a bright orange. But when they printed, they were exact. So the problem with like the screen is never perfect in what it looks like. But sometimes if you're ever worried, especially if you have a logo in the same color that you're trying to match on the screen, you always want to print a sample, and then if it doesn't match, like the example I just gave, is then we want to try hex colors. So the whole goal is that it prints properly. It might not always preview properly.
Now, tell me, please, you mentioned that the system will save all the jobs, right? Now, it will save all the variations, or just the last one? When I save it, it will overwrite the previous version.
You can normally tell the ones that it's done. Let me just go to this one, and we will just proceed it. So it's actually a thing. It will save every single variation, but you can't get a production file unless they actually submitted the card. So if they didn't actually order the card, there will be no production file. So you should see now, now this one has a name because I preceded it. That means it accepted the name, my identifier field that I chose, and it's an approved card. So this one will have a production file. All the rest are just instances of me trying. So although I can get just approved PDF, it's actually going to fail if I try a production file. So anything with a name and or approved means that it was a submitted order. So the client had to at least proceed the card. Maybe they didn't enter a quantity and check out, but they did at least approve the proof.
So if they want to go back to some previous version, they have just to log in and change it again to go back. Let's say they change the title and then they decided to change it again. They have to unapprove it, change it, and approve again, right?
Yeah, basically online, that's kind of something we covered with the MIS portion, is just they just hit edit, and it will just take them right back to the page, and they can just make the change and hit proceed again and approve it again.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. And then let's say the client did all that, submitted the order, it came through, still made a typo and didn't realize. You can also come in here and hit edit order and say this was actually supervisor. You can proceed it, and then you can get yourself a production file. I mean, you can open it in InDesign or whatever else you use, but you can also just do it though. So I gotta hit generate.
I'm just curious for saving and storing all these files. You have pretty much unlimited capacity.
Yes, these are these ones. I don't even know if these ones are on our server. These ones might be on the eDoc server. I'm not 100% sure. But yes, they never go away. They don't ever clear themselves out.
And if,
And
God forbid, something happens with this server, especially after coming here today with no internet, we're like, good luck.
yeah, we
So
yes, server-wise, we're actually at a thing called Rackspace in Virginia, that is solely meant to be like a server where we store things. So they have backups. We back up daily. They have all kinds of backups. We even have another backup here on our own server. So there's no lack of backups, and even if Rackspace runs down, we have it here.
okay, yeah, great. Okay, let's hope for the best. What can I tell you?
Well, let me know. Work on that card that we worked on the other day, and see how it goes.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any other questions? I'll put the recording up. I know it is overwhelming, especially if this is the first time you've seen it. But I always say that probably the best thing you can do is try and pick an easy card. I know it's hard to know right away, but try and pick a card and just go make one. And that's the easiest way to come up with questions than to just theoretically, think of them or try and follow the process.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right. Yep. Thanks everyone for coming.
Okay. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. Bye.